If you bought that Fujifilm camera for its amazing in-camera JPEG capabilities, or you want to learn more about that, I've got a video for you all about the highlight and shadow tone settings, the tone curve, which is an update to a video I did about this previously about 5 years ago, because Fujifilm did make some changes in the way this setting is implemented. When we're talking about the tone curve, or the highlight and shadow tone setting in older cameras, we're talking about changing the contrast of your picture, changing the contrast in a much more targeted way than you can with other camera systems. When we add contrast, we apply an S curve to the tone curve, just looking at this in Lightroom because it's easier. But as we add contrast, you can see this turning into an S. The highlights on the right side of the histogram, those are getting brighter. The shadows, the darker areas on the left side of the histogram, are getting darker. That's the contrast S curve. And the sharper that S is, the more contrast you have in that picture. Fujifilm gives us separate control over the two halves of this S curve for, again, more precise control of that contrast. If we just want to add contrast in the shadows, making the dark areas darker, we increase the shadow contrast. The highlights, the sky in this example, aren't affected at all, just the dark areas, the shadow areas in the photo. Or if we want to add contrast to the highlight areas only, the sky here, we add highlight contrast and the shadows are unaffected. You see, those aren't changing at all as we adjust that highlights slider. If we have a bright photo where most of the histogram is on the right, adjusting the shadow tone won't do much, if anything at all, because there's nothing in the shadows. However, adjusting the highlight tone has a huge impact on the way that photo looks. Conversely, if we have a dark photo where most of the histogram is on the left, adjusting the highlight tones won't do much at all since there's not much in the highlights here. But adjusting the shadow tone is going to dramatically change the look of the photo. And that's exactly what's happening in your Fujifilm camera as you adjust the highlight tone and the shadow tone. Several years ago, Fujifilm combined this setting into one setting in the image quality setting menu, Tone Curve, and they've also let us see what that curve actually looks like as we're making those adjustments. And not only can we see what it's doing to the curve, but the screen is transparent, so we can see how those changes are affecting our photo real time. And it's the same concept that we just saw in that Lightroom demo. Positive numbers increase contrast in that tone area, and negative numbers decrease contrast. So if we add positive numbers to the highlight tone, it'll make the bright areas brighter and really not touch the shadows at all. Negative numbers are going to do the opposite. They're going to make the bright areas a little darker for flatter contrast. It's the same for the shadow tone. Positive numbers make the dark areas darker, not touching the highlights at all, and negative numbers make the dark areas a little brighter. The ranges for all of these are +4 for a lot of contrast to -2 for flatter contrast. And newer cameras give you more refinement with half-step control. And because this is all based on your histogram, adjusting your exposure after you make tone curve adjustments, that's going to affect how much of the photo and where in that photo the contrast is going to be adjusted. I have a really strong shadow tone here, and as I decrease the exposure and that picture gets darker, more of the histogram is brought into the shadow area. That contrast curve is affecting more of the photo. More of the picture is affected by that setting. As I increase the exposure, that curve is affecting less of the photo because more of the histogram is being brought out of that shadow tone area. These settings are really useful to know if you're creating your own film recipes. I have an entire methodology, a technique for creating my own recipes. You can follow along with that methodology using worksheets and the entire process in the Creating Unique Fujifilm Film Recipes course that you'll find at photocourses.link/recipes. You can get 20% off of that course with the code TUBE20. But as you're creating these recipes, you'll want to understand what that tone curve does to make tweaks to your contrast. Applying negative numbers for both of these is going to give you a very flat style if you want a flat style, while positive numbers for both of these are going to give you a more contrasty style. And just note that all of this is on top of your selected film simulation. Your film simulation is like your base style, and each film simulation has its own tone curve. So when you adjust the tone curve setting in your camera in the image quality settings, that is being added to or taking away contrast from the tone curve that is already built in to that film simulation, whether that's a very contrasty film simulation like Eterna Bleach Bypass, or a very flat film simulation like ProNeg Standard. You can make adjustments to your contrast real time as you're shooting. Press the Q button on the back of the camera to pull up the quick menu, go to the highlight tone or shadow tone settings, and adjust your contrast in here. Now, this doesn't show you the actual curve itself, but since you already understand what that tone curve looks like as you make these adjustments, you don't really need it. You can check out another video that I did to learn more about using the Q menu while you're shooting to adjust the look of your photo. You can also make these adjustments to your photo after the fact if you're recording the RAW file. While you're in playback, you press the Q button, and then you'll see these tone curve adjustments that you can make, changing the contrast of your photo after you've already captured it. And again, you do need to be recording the RAW file format to be able to do that. So that's the tone curve adjustment. It's just one of the many settings that you can use to further refine Fujifilm's amazing film simulations and make your own unique Fujifilm film recipes. Again, you can check out that course if you want to learn the methodology and the process to do this, or just go out with your camera right now, fiddle around with those settings, and see what it does to your photo depending on the exposure. If you have any other questions or comments, please let us know here. Thank you so much for watching. Subscribe for more great tips like this every week, and we'll see you in the next video.